Hey, so in a video you made a while back, you thanked Lord Immolation for talking about time, and now I'd like to do the same to you. Because, well, yeah, time travel is my passion, if you will, and from that it's grown into the theory of time after I actually started putting philosophy into it. But I just want to focus on what you were talking about in regards to the nature of time, to try to figure out exactly what your stance is. I know you're talking about consciousness and having these arguments, but um, a lot of what you say, and at least from my point of view, and I'm completely willing to admit that it's possible that my point of view is a bit skewed, but it seems like you could, but where some of your actual arguments lie is in trying to figure out the nature of time itself. Um, and so from your discussion with Lord Immolation on time, you say that it takes a certain amount of time in order for consciousness to manifest, which means you probably follow the B theory of time, which is that time as a dimension is necessary for existence as we know it. So the universe is four-dimensional instead of the three-dimensional A theory. When you said time is like a snake eating its own tail, it gives birth to and swallows itself all in one motion. And time is not an infinite extension on a number line. I'm not really sure about what you're saying there. It sounds like it could be two things. It sounds like you could actually be going for the three-dimensional A theory, which is that time, the future and the past don't exist, and time is merely a construct that we use for explaining existence. Um, but yeah, but because of what you said before and some other things that you say, that doesn't seem like it's what you think. It seems like what you're talking about is how time is a loop, and well, the circle that Kyle was talking about, and the um, yeah, the whole of space time becoming like a sphere, I guess. But yeah, I talk about it as a loop just because it's easier to talk about that way. But yeah, it sounds like what you're saying is that it's a loop, but it's also constantly changing, and which essentially what that sounds like to me, in conventionally put, it sounds like what you're talking about isn't a real loop. It's a spiral because I'm speaking a per jurist point of view, um, that if things were changing, then it wouldn't be the same time, because time, by definition, in that sense, is set. Um, but I agree more with you. What you're saying actually sounds pretty close to my own theory. Well, my own theory can describe that anyway, though I'm not sure if you would agree with it, because my theory does rely on random instances. Because, well, I do believe that even if time is a loop, then the fact that it exists at all is an uncaused fact. So um, to me, it's really immaterial as to whether it's a line or a loop. But um, uh, anyway, to what I was saying about there's two ways that I can think of in preserving the time, as you would, I think you explained it there, in that it's looping and constantly changing at the same time. Um, the one way would be to say that there's some point which differentiates between the cycles. So there's some point in the universe where it stops being one cycle and starts being another. And to me that would sound like you would basically be just describing separate universes which don't actually have anything to do with each other. And the only other way that I can think of handling that is with um, including random effects and uncaused causes, which is how I handle it, because the way I describe it is that random events can happen at any point in time. Then they don't necessarily have to happen in our present, because where we are in the present can be different. Like, you can travel around the world at a high speed, come back in the future. So where we are on the timeline is, I don't think it's arbitrary, and I have other ways of explaining that, but um, there's always a present existing regardless of where you are in time. And so, because of that, random events could just as easily happen in our past, which would mean that our past may not be as we perceived it. And so, my theory does have some problems with causality, but I have problems with causality anyway. Um, let's see, what else was I planning on saying here? Yeah, the way that I talk about is about using temporal objects to track time as a way of explaining this without making it seem like um, without it essentially being separate universes, because the theory only really does require one uncaused cause and one unaffected effect at the beginning and the end of the universe, or simply the universe's existence if it is a loop. But yeah, the way that I describe it is with what I call temporal objects, which is the sum of the movement that an object, well, a group of objects, or a single object, or any movement that is the same. So if a bunch of section of mass is all moving in the same direction at the same speed and moving in exactly the same way, then we just refer to that movement as a single object. But because we don't include the object itself, we only include the movements that the object makes as a mathematical equation. We take it out of the physical universe entirely and just speak about it theoretically. And so theoretically, we can just put up another. I hesitate to call it an axis on the time graph, because it's not the same as it wouldn't be the same as the x-axis, but it's easier to talk about this way. I basically put up the x-axis, and then you can have steps of these temporal objects, which can well, they can help us track time in the universe as it's changing, and explain why it's still the same universe. Um, and the reason that we can do that with temporal objects as opposed to um, temporal parts, which is the leading theory, which just indexes time. The problem with that is that it's trying to index time by talking about physical objects. But we can't know anything about physical objects because the universe is smooth both in time and space, and the only time that breaks is with a random occurrence of movement. And so we can actually demarcate these temporal objects and see them as actual things, because they do have beginnings and they do have ends. There's actual points in space that we can know. We may not ever know the actual point, but it's possible for us to know, as opposed to just arbitrary lines drawn in time, the way that temporal parts work. But anyway, yeah, I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts, because I don't know, you seemed excited when the time idea came up, and I don't meet a lot of people who know a lot about time, so I'd really like to get some feedback on my theory if you have time to watch a couple videos. But yeah, talk to you later.